I want to also do it like this. We have the issue of pay progression came out very strongly. The issue of integration, integration of services. So we have now established the human capital strategy, and one of the things, we haven't communicated this yet, one of the things that we want to do is to pilot the issue of business partnering model, so that we can start improving how we integrate human resources and how they function in the various departments. What we have noticed is that we can't talk about professionalization if we don't talk about the functionality and effectiveness of the HR units, because they are the ones that are supposed to analyze the business model for us, to tell us that these functions are not correctly grouped. They are supposed to be the one that say this business model is not good enough for the mandate of the department. They are the ones that are supposed to also guide us in terms of interpreting all these new changes that we're coming up with. So the issue of integration of the matters that are related to functionality of HR is quite critical. There's a big issue of NOCHIS and PMDS, and then I think, Renisha, I'm going to, because you are, in terms of age, I'm 27, by the way. In terms of age, you are the oldest. She will explain to us why were bonuses abolished, even though Treasury will be better placed to deal with that. I think another part, I don't know where Anusha is the issue of retention. So we are, the interventions that we're bringing in, especially with the human capital strategy, it looks at the whole value chain of human resource management. And one area, one pillar that we're coming strongly on is the issue of retention. We have also noted that there are many departments that have an incorrect service delivery model, and that has also impacted on their organizational structure. So it will lead to the frustrations that you have in terms of how you deal with approvals, how you deliver services, understanding why there are frustrations between functions, whether it's health and social development, social workers and nurses and so forth. So we need to correctly understand the service delivery models of departments, the mandates of the departments, and then correctly come up with the structures that we are dealing with. And then Anusha is still out, but the issue of a shared services model, and particularly the issue of the directives are quite critical. I think I will leave the political questions to politicians that are here. But we have to also understand that in terms of practices that may exist in the environment, when it comes to appointments, we cannot have any of us as officials functioning outside of the prescripts of the law. So if you are going to compromise yourself, my DG likes to say there's no administrative or constitution that talks about constitutional values and principles. The first one of those values and principles is professional ethics. Let's equip ourselves and see how we can manage that. I think I'll start. Should I start with you, DG, or we start from the other side? With yourself. Thank you, DG.
No, thanks, Facilitator. Fortunately, I pay everybody who is in this house to advise me, not to ask me questions. So I don't know. They are very high-level people that must be giving us solutions of what is it that we should do and what is it that we should not do. Some of the issues that they are talking about, I've got no clue. I always hear them about them from them. So that's basically how it works. But let me just deal with 1 or 2, 3 issues. I think the rest, I have colleagues here in the office of the Premier, in the even amongst yourselves, some of you might want to take a shot on some of the questions that you have raised. I think the rest of other questions and the brief was for us to indicate what is our view relating to the Public Service Amendment Act or Bill and the Public Administration Management Amendment Management Bill, which are critical in terms of a lot of other issues that we were raising. A number of issues that you raised, which I record here, and I was asking Dr. Pera here whether our forums are functional, both the HR forums and the HRD forums, on relating to a variety of issues, because a considerable number of issues that you are discussing must be ventilated there, including us, because the HR forums must generate ideas and they share those ideas with the forum of heads of departments for us to process them. And if there's a policy imperative that we need to develop, we then have to come up with that policy at that level, recommend to the Executive Council for adoption. So I understand that there are concerns relating to filling of positions. Of course, somebody who was very direct about this is Thabang Selemela, who highlighted that there should be a correlation between professionalization of the public service. It must be commensurate to available resources, because we need to ensure that we have got the right capacity to execute the responsibilities that we need to execute, but also we will have to ensure that the resources are there to support the bodies that we will be. If we talk about posts for vets, that is a concern for me. If we're talking about posts for engineers and other related important critical positions that we need to deal with, people who are taking care of our animals in various resorts, and we are unable to fill those posts, statutory positions in our various departments, that worries us. And normally when we discuss the budget, we try to ensure that we assist those departments to prioritize resources for filling of at least critical and also statutory positions. That is, I think that is very critical in terms of the filling of such positions. We are trying to work hard now with the forum we have created to deal with technology. They call it PG Talk, to bring transversal processes relating to information and communication technology. We seem not to be succeeding because, and somebody raised the role that the SETA plays, Minister, and I think we should be engaging further with SETA because we are unable to bring uniform and standard information and communication technology processes in government, because some of these issues we have to rely heavily on SETA. And I think it's one area that we will have to see how best we can deal with. I think a number of issues, colleagues, with that. The HOD, and maybe I've seen they had a caucus with the MEC there relating to nurses, professional nurses that find themselves in a social development environment to deal with that. The FSTD and Dr. Pera, they are dealing with this thing of what one colleague was saying, we seem to be so bad in managing that process, such that we are even decampaigning the ruling party, secular 49, I don't know how, but they are working on that process. Maybe Dr. Pera or Di Makazo, you can have a mic to talk specifically on that, because it is important for us to explain those processes. The back and forth, I don't even know about them. I only see a document that is finalized with Treasury recommendation on availability of funds. Then I sign it off for Premier's signature for PESAL to be open. So you can understand that my role is very insignificant in that process. Therefore, I am unable to explain fully in as far as that is concerned. I think shared services model, we agree, given the constraints of resources, we might have to start looking at issues of shared services. We are already trying and looking at a model, and we are benchmarking through recommendations of PG Talk on shared services on ICT to try to see how far we can go with that going forward. So, facilitator, I don't think I should attempt to go deeper into what the colleagues have raised. We have had. Some of them are for our own consumption at home. Some of them belong into their own terrain in various forums that they will have to look at. I think one matter that colleague raised now is around, and I've seen that we are saying this issue of doing business with government must be clarified. I've seen it in the amendment now, or the amended public service bill. It must actually be fully accentuated. We should know precisely what it means, because if I want really to buy something from Mangaung, a house, a land from the municipality, that's in my personal capacity. I'm no more a public servant, and nobody can say I can't buy a house. If Public Works sells land and I want to buy land or a plot, I'm doing that in my personal capacity as an employee. But I see that we have a DPSA opinion on that in terms of whether that's doing business with government. When I thought it has to do with trade and so on, and selling goods and services between government and public servant, which is a different story altogether. So, Dr. Pera, you want to come quickly, deal with this thing, or Di Makazo, between the two of you, that process, so that, and colleagues must understand we have had all other issues that you have raised, and then HOD Patlo can quickly also deal with some of these issues. The rest of the issues, I think most of them were directed to the DPSA, who are our regulators. We do what they instruct us to do, nothing more, nothing less. We can't be creative on directives.
No, thank you, DG. DG will remember that I will be leaving now, and you will continue emceeing as I leave. Colleagues, Circular 49 it shouldn't be controversial, but it is in our situation. But I think what we dealing with sometimes is not understanding that stood it as if it was relaxing measures a bit, that you can take things through the technical committee system that we have without actually doing those checks, without checking whether the post is on the structure, without checking whether the post is funded. And what we've been doing is that now department, go back, this structure that you are using is not approved or even concurred, because sometimes you have a situation where the MEC has approved the structure, but the structure has not been concurred by the minister, because it must be concurred by the minister. That is one problem. The other problem that we have is that of unfunded vacancies. You see, the other mistake is to confuse issues of Regulation 57 with Circular 49. Because Regulation 57 is very clear. You will not extend additional to the establishment appointment. But you have a situation where departments try to extend appointments or appoint people anew, and they take the route of Circular 49. Now that is also creating some misunderstandings, and we are clear. Regulation 57 appointments are not regulated in terms of the circular. They are sui generis. If I use my legal training, they are sui generis. They are regulated in terms of that regulation, and they are not impacted upon by the directive. So it's just a question of understanding this process, but at least the departments are understanding. We have had departments that advertised posts successfully. Department of Community Safety, Roads and Transport is one of those, successfully after following this process of the circular. So now it's extended. I was hoping that it will not be extended. I was hoping it will die on the 31st March. It's extended. It's with us for another year. So you will feel my power for another year. So, thank you.
Okay, are you fine? Are you okay? Can I hand over back to the facilitator? Okay, fine.
Minister and colleagues, good afternoon. Colleagues, it's getting a little bit hot in here now. Minister, when we boarded the flight this morning and came to Pretoria, it was bitterly cold. But now I'm finding it extremely hot. Minister, I must thank the colleagues for the very robust discussions, deliberations, and discourse towards the latter part of the morning, and now as we start the afternoon. Minister would have observed that whenever we have the socialization programs, Minister, they always send me first to answer the questions, colleagues. I'm the doctor and they are practicing doctors. Colleagues, Candy Crush. Did you hear of Candy Crush? Computer games. Many public servants in many departments are not always gainfully employed. That's a struggle, that's a challenge. And when you pass the computers, they are wizards in Candy Crush. Minister, South Africa is taking the award in Candy Crush. We must, colleagues, we must embrace the new world of work. We must embrace the new world of work. So the question from an HR&D perspective would be, how are we managing the surplus and the shortage of personnel? And can we confirm as managers, senior managers and leaders that indeed, every public servant is gainfully employed? Then we would find out, Minister, it's never about the quantity, it's always about the quality. Colleagues, we must define sometimes, Minister, the words that we use, colleagues. Comrade simply means you and I together in this. So as HR&D colleagues, we can also use the word comrade. When we talk about cadre deployment is not only political deployment. Cadre deployment can simply be that in your experience and in your ranks of work, there were certain individuals who had competencies and could do the work. And sometimes we tend to politicize it. And in HR&D, we must be a little bit watchful about it. So what I can confirm with you, colleagues, is that the Public Service Act and its regulations are for the public service and not external bodies. So in other words, what external bodies do is beyond the control of the Public Service Act and her regulations as statutory provisions and the law that governs HR&D in the public service. But we must thank reform or the suggestion that why don't we combine processes or processes, and why don't we create singular systems? We do recognize that when the recruitment pack comes to you in a manual process, it is exceptionally lengthy and quite laborious. And I'm giving you assurance that we would go back and investigate the option of rather expanding the Z83 by a couple of pages as an example, instead of the CV. But that's something we would certainly look into. I think what's the other important one for me to respond to you today, colleagues, is to say the directive in itself is progressive. The directive in itself argues for modernization of the public service. It argues, colleagues, also for a public service that is digitized and that is automated, so that we have nimble and agile public service. Now at the DPSA, we take this exceptionally seriously. And what we're going to do is, through an integrated process, we are working with the National Treasury to create automated systems in a two-pronged approach. The first being the integrated or e-recruitment system, and subsequent the rest of the modules within HR&D. And these modules are like e-leave systems, PMDS, HRD, etc. So that work is also underway together with the National Treasury. And this is against the backdrop, colleagues, of understanding. So why did we use a two-pronged approach? Because we must understand that IT architecture, infrastructure must enable systems. And such a system that we build is not exclusive to the DPSA, but inclusive of 158 departments across national and provincial levels. And therefore, we must make sure as the DPSA that when we implement such systems, that those systems work and that they are well. Note it, please, colleagues, brown bag sessions in your province and departments. Brown bag is akin to a lunch bag. And during lunch sessions, speak to colleagues about interviewing, the skills, etc. It doesn't have to be formalized training that we pay for, Minister, but these are the kind of trainings that departments can do internal. But in addition to that, colleagues, the interview is not the sole criteria when it comes to selection and appointment of individuals. We also look at other forms, one being the integrity and ethical test, or in other words, what is commonly known to you as the technical tests. We also have written assignments, competency assessments, together with the interview. And this composite package then is actually the package that you would consider at the end of the day. Now, colleagues, I'm sure nobody, Minister, has got an assessment criteria such as, if you speak well, you get 10 out of 10. If you don't speak well, you get 6 out of 10. Then you're going to give Anusha 20 out of 10. So we don't have that, colleagues, all right? But what I can tell you is the technical test is 30%, the interview is 50%, and the competency assessments now must form part of the package at 20%. So please understand that, colleagues, we're not going to use a competency assessment as a sole criteria, okay? That's not what we're saying. We're saying as a composite package, your technical test will be 30%, your interviews 50%, your competency assessment 20%, coming out of 100% at the end of the day. The last part that's important there, colleagues, you've got oral, which is your interviews, you've got computer simulations, and you've got written tests. We say either or. We're not compelling you to do all three. So please, colleagues, when you do your technical tests, you would do it on a particular scenario. Please bring in at least a few questions on integrity and ethical testing. All right? So ask a couple questions on integrity and ethics. Now, colleagues, I'm going to leave it here and allow then my next colleague to come up. But before I leave, let me also extend to you an invite. You are aware of our email addresses and our details. Please contact us. And out of the session, we could also do sessions for any particular department that would want us to do it. But we do advocate for online meetings. I thank you very much.
Thank you, colleagues. I'm back. So Anusha left me with some very hard questions, but I'm going to take the easy answers. So issues on remuneration. I think what we must bear in mind as public servants is that we are expected to deliver a lot as a country and as public servants, but we are also working within limited resources. We don't have resources to pay people bonuses or to do the extravagant things that public servants might want to have. I think we have to be very cognizant of the environment we sit in and what our demands are as a country. But with that in mind, I think we must not rely solely on money as an incentive. I think Nico spoke to other incentives within the public service that we do offer. We have bursary schemes, we have training opportunities that lots of us are exposed to and can be exposed to as incentives to doing great work in the public service. So I think it's important that as public servants we explore those mechanisms. But having said that, on remuneration, there is a lot of work that is being done at the DPSA in terms of developing a remuneration policy, which will speak to then alternatives to performance bonuses, pay progression, grade progression, and OSDs particularly. I'm sure colleagues have raised this in this meeting. So we're hoping that in the next year, as DPSA does that work, we will see some products coming out of that. And I think bearing in mind that a lot of these matters are collective bargaining matters, so we are heavily reliant on those processes as well. There were questions around the may and the shall and the must that we use in legislation. I think we try as far as possible to make sure that where we use these, we use it consistently. So colleagues, just perhaps quick, if you see a may and if you see a may, you must assume that you have discretionary powers. If you see a must and a shall, it means you must do it. And that's just the simple way of explaining it. But again, like Anusha said, if you have issues around particular provisions you want us to help you with, please feel free to contact us, and we're happy to help. There was a question on disparities of conditions of service across the administration. So we do recognize that within municipalities themselves, even individual municipalities, you have lots of disparities in terms of conditions of service. Across the public service and municipalities, you also have that. But as we're introducing legislation into Parliament, we also are mindful to remove unjustifiable disparities. So if you look at the law itself that we've put into Parliament, one of the aims is to ensure that where there should not be disparities in wages or conditions of service, we should find mechanisms to remove those disparities. I think what's important to also note is that within any employing system, you will have disparities. But the idea is not to remove all disparities, but to remove those that we can't really justify as being necessary for that purpose. And I'll give simple examples. If you're a legal advisor at the DPSA and you're a legal advisor in a province and you're doing the same kind of work, why should your job be different? Why should your remuneration and conditions of service be different? And I think that's what we will try to do as we move the law forward and as we develop our remuneration policies. In respect of doing business with the state, there are provisions in both the Public Administration Management Act and the Public Service Regulations that prohibit employees from conducting business with the state. Now, the team of ethics and anti-corruption in the Department of Public Service has issued also, through the Minister, directives to assist you in determining what activities are prohibited under those laws. And they've gone as far as explaining and defining that any transaction that happens between an institution, be it a public service department at national or a public service department at a municipal level or a public service department at a provincial, if you are going to transact with that department, either to buy assets from that department or to provide services to that department, you are not permitted to do that. And the reason why these laws are crafted in this particular manner is to ensure that there is no conflict of interest. So when you are a public servant, you are expected to be part of an employer. You cannot then become an outsider buying assets of the department. It's a mechanism to manage conflict, and I think we must recognize that that is the intention of the law. Sometimes it doesn't work in our favor, but that is the principle on which we have premised the public service and the public administration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, colleagues. I was asking my colleagues to, okay. Oh, great. Thank you. Please, where's the mic? And then I also want to say that the MEC has invited you to have lunch with her, ma'am. The HOD, even though she's from health, has invited you to have lunch with her to discuss those issues.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mabunda, Minister, and DG and MEC, and colleagues. I think most of the inputs coming from the colleagues from social development were correct. And others, the DG has responded to, even issues raised by Mayor Grant and others, I agree fully with their inputs. But a short discussion that I had with the MEC of Health, she wanted to understand and know about professional nurses in the Department of Social Development, their role and whatnot and so on. Same goes for in social development. Mainly, you'll find social workers and so on and so forth. But the question that the MEC asked me, which is apt and quite correct, is that in social development, whilst you have professional nurses, might be as the same as in education you are having social workers. In health, you have social workers. In subs, you have social workers. What are you really saying? Are you saying all those people should be employed in social development and be seconded to either health, education, or any other department? The answer is no. That's not how government works. That's not how government works, because it's a mosaic. There's an assortment of functions in the department. You cannot begin to pigeonhole certain careers. But the issues raised by Metladi here needs attention. But let me just explain the following, just quickly. Health and social development belong to the same sector, the same bargaining chamber. Public health and social development sectoral bargaining chamber, the same. They belong to the same SETA, HW SETA. They are bound by the same resolutions. Now, where's the problem? If you belong to the same SETA, bargaining council, bound by the same resolutions and so on and so forth. And Nico, Babu Nico, or Babu Mabunda.
27-year-old.
You are correct. We need to have a service model and a structure which is proper. We should hit the right nail with the right hammer. Just to quote you. We have professional norms and standards that are looking into all categories. But that said, the points raised by Metladi really do need to be looked at. And we agree that we need to beef up on the nursing side as a department. Thank you.
Thank you so much, my leader. I think the last point that you have raised, I'm very much happy about. That we need to look at what the root causes are in terms of the issues that are being raised. It might not necessarily be about the location, as you correctly point, but it might also be about the the way in which there's that professional tension that might exist between professions, social workers, psychologists, as well as nurses. So it's quite correct. I like that part, and we'll take. So colleagues, what I want to say is, in terms of this work, as I mentioned when we started, we are taking most of the comments that you have made. We are not here to respond and give answers. We are here to absorb like a sponge what you have said, to verify if the work that we are doing is leading us towards the correct processes and so forth. There are three main issues that have not been responded to. There's the issue of the SETA role in innovation, as well as technological advancements in the public service. The president has appointed, in fact it was cabinet, not the president, has appointed an interministerial task team with the presidency, DCDT, DPSA, SETA, and communications, digital, you'll correct me later. Digital communications, yes, and technologies, thank you. And we are looking at whether, first of all, SETA has been playing the role that it was supposed to play. SETA has been functioning in the manner that it was supposed to function, and whether the services that they provide are services that are comparable when you look at the other service providers in that area. What Renisha didn't tell you is that she's a board member of SETA, and she should have responded to this, but she's not here in her capacity as a board member of SETA. But we have also committed that if there are questions that you'd like to hear more about, you may reach out to us via email or calls, and we'll be able to engage on that. But we are looking at innovation. We are looking at how we even the correct location of the Center for Public Service and Innovation around that part. There's the issue of social media. The question that was raised was that how do we then, especially in this area, I think it was Silimela, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it was correct, yeah. So we have a policy of government and communications. And as officials, we always have to adhere to policies that govern us as officials. That's the bottom line, that's the first line. It doesn't mean that as a South African you are now muzzled and you cannot air your own opinion, but you have to be understanding of the policies that govern you as an official, and you must also be aware that when you speak, you must be clear that you're not speaking on behalf of government, so that there's a delineation between your own views and that of government. So let's understand our policies and all of that. And then the last one is the issue of OSD. We have instituted a review, in fact, both OSD and pay progression. We have instituted a wholesome review of the what we call a personal expenditure review. And the personal expenditure review has now given us a report. The report has been shared with the cabinet. It will now be taken for discussions in other areas with finance and so forth, including organized labor. And we want to review the whole remuneration structure of government to address some of the challenges that have been identified. One thing with OSD, we have found that because we entered into an agreement with labor, we then allowed every department to decide how they are going to roll out OSD. So you find that OSD was supposed to improve retention, sourcing, what do you call it? Acquiring and retention of scarce skills, but we have implemented it in areas where we cannot claim to have scarce skills. someone with a metric qualification in a particular sector, they are now an OSD beneficiary. So we need to, so that's one of the big challenge. And then we have also found out 67% of the wage bill actually goes to OSD. 67%. So when we talk about issues of bloating of the public service, it's not numbers. The numbers have been, we did a study and we found that we have the same amount of public servants that we had in 1996 when we finalized the amalgamation of all those Bantustans and former provinces and so forth into one public service. We have the same amount of public servants, but the amount that is being paid is about 4 times 1994. So that's another big challenge that we have. There are all other challenges that are there. We will share with you once we have dealt with them. I think the other one that speaks to the issue of SMS especially is that with OSD, there are people that earn more than chief directors and they will refuse to do anything extra, but they are non-SMS. So they will never apply for an SMS job. They will never do any additional work. They don't have to be available to do the work that you have to do as an SMS. So you have that limitation that OSD has brought into the system, and we need to find a way to address. But these are things that we are currently looking at and will be dealing with. Colleagues, we want to thank you so much. We want to invite the Minister for the Public Service and Administration to reflect on the comments that you have made and share the remarks that she has brought for us. This is her Imbizo.
Of MECs and acknowledge the ones that are in the room. We need to appreciate that. I think it's the first province that we've been to that the Premier came out to participate in the program. And yes, with other premiers, they've sent the DGs and MECs owing to the timing. We all know the timing is requiring some of us to be out there talking and encouraging voters to go out and vote. Let me therefore also greet I've greeted the MECs in the room, the DG and his team. The team is led here by DDG Mabunda from DPSA. But I think without wasting much time going to each and every one, because for me, the audience here is the VIPs of the day. It's those people that we seldom meet, and time to share views with them becomes critical. And therefore, I greet you all. This is now afternoon, I guess, this afternoon, and let me start also by wishing our Muslim friends and colleagues, citizens of South Africa, Eid, as they have now finished the race. That is Ramadan, a period where they introspect, a period where they pray, a period where they connect with their spirits, which is then a period of spiritual reflection, a period where they starve themselves purposely. Just to prove that you can live without food. Because sometimes we tend to forget that. And therefore, as they get out of that, this is the time that they show that love. It's the time of their festivities. It's the time that they show sharing, and we must appreciate that. We are here today in a South Africa which respects all religion, a South Africa which we agreed and accepted that we would want to see a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic South Africa. Yes, with prosperity, of course. And here in this room is gathered a leadership of government who must drive the constitutional values, the constitutional principles, the constitutional ethos. And therefore here we have a huge responsibility. I was worried at some point, DG, when I was listening to just the tone of the discussion and the issues raised. I asked myself a question. Do we as public servants really understand what the likes of OR Tambo, this being a Heroes Month, the likes of Chrisani, who yesterday we were commemorating his 11th passing on. Do we understand what they sacrificed their lives for? Do we truly understand what it means to serve? Do we truly understand what we mean when we say we belong, we serve? I mean, all these phrases that when we want to be seen to be politically correct, all these phrases that we use, do we truly understand the intricacies involved in serving? That it's actually a sacrifice to serve. You can't serve without sacrificing. The two go hand in hand. Because some of the questions say to me, what the people say out there about us is true. But let me probably approach it differently and say what we should be doing when we serve the people. One question which I must quickly deal with so that I don't forget it, which Nyeko asked me to respond to. He said it's a political question. And I want to say, Nyeko, I allowed you the space for me to answer that question, but it's not a political question. If we understand what public administration is about, It's not a political question, because public administration operates in a political space. So there can never be anything that is deemed to be